Hi, the other day I posted on my Facebook page, Mental Health by Jennifer Carey, something regarding the concept of the inner child. And I mentioned that if you don't understand what that is about, you comment on the post so that I can be able to explain it further. And quite a number of people commented saying they would want to know about this concept further. But because it's quite lengthy, I thought of doing a video on YouTube. And I'm going to share this video to my page explaining, this thing you keep hearing, inner child, childhood, what are the two, how do they relate? And I'm going to explain that in this video, so keep it here. Now, when it comes to the concept of the inner child, I would like you to imagine it as a smaller version of you. The kind of a child that you were, the kind of a child that you were molded into, the experiences you had, whether you were treated well where you were growing up, or whether you were abused or you were taken through this or that, that kind of a child is still within you. It never goes anywhere even as you grow up. Imagine it like it's kind of covered by our, the adult version of us, but it is still in there. Now, that is your inner child. Each and every one of us, you there, me here, we all have an inner child. The question is, how healthy is this inner child? If you grew up with certain issues, like myself, for those who have seen me share my story, if you grew up if you grew up with certain undesirable circumstances, your inner child is likely to be having certain issues, certain challenges, certain wounds, and they never go anywhere. So that child is still within you with all the wounds that you sustained. And for those who had a good, experience growing up, no matter how many or how few they are, their child is not problematic. That child is at peace, they are calm, and they're not interfering with the adult version of them. Now, for the rest of us who had issues, that inner child produces problems to you as an adult. So you may speak to a person and think that, you are talking to them, but no, you are talking to the small inner child in them. And that is what will inform how they will respond. And that is why you hear people saying, wow, I talked to that man, I talked to that woman, and she responded like a small child, like she can't understand anything. Why is she so irritable, and so on and so forth? What you don't know is that you actually spoke to the inner version of them, the one that is wounded. I'm going to explain the different types of inner child, and as you shall see, they determine how the adult responds, either to people who are speaking to them, to situations in life, to challenges that they face, and so on and so forth. So let us go right into the different types of inner child so that you can get this better. Now, we start with the fearful inner child. The fearful inner child. This is quite common, to be honest. And I would like you to imagine a person who grew up in an environment that was devoid of safety and security. And when I talk of safety and security, I'm talking about both the physical safety and the emotional safety, and other types of safety, including psychological. So this kind of a person grew up in an environment in which fear was instilled into them. So consider a child who grew up with an alcoholic father or alcoholic mother, and this alcoholic parent would come home and cause all manner of issues. They cause all manner of issues. So you find that this child was used to being in deep fear, because maybe this parent will come and start shouting, start throwing things all over the place and all that. And so you find that the person grew up with a lot of fear within them, fear of being hurt specifically, because they were always shielding themselves, always, hiding, always running so that they are not hurt in the process, because this would also happen, or it also happens among those who grew up with parents who would engage in domestic violence. So when the parents are fighting, this child was always shielding herself, or fearing that they are going to be hurt in one way or another. So even after the person grows up, guess what they are? They are still fearful of being hurt. Now, for those who grew up in environments that did not have emotional safety, and in this manner, you are not allowed to express your emotions freely. You cried and you are beaten even further. Even when you're happy, you cannot say it, because there is an atmosphere of fear in the home. So those who grew up in such environments, they also have a fearful inner child. Now, unfortunately, the fearful inner child is one of the most dysfunctional adults. Why do I say so? Because this is a person who is in constant fear of being hurt. Constant fear of being hurt. And what does that mean? If in a relationship with this person, they will always do what you call in my native language, jump ahead of the drum. They will always, be shielding themselves when they don't need to. And of course, they are shielding themselves sometimes by attacking you. So a person will attack you because after all, you will attack them. That is their kind of reasoning. And when you do something that, something that did not mean much, you never meant to hide them, to hurt them in one way or another, you make a benign remark, a very harmless remark, they take it that you want to hurt them in one way or another. And most of them, they find it extremely hard to commit to relationships, and it's because they are figuring, or they are reasoning that, does it matter? This person is going to leave me anyway. Because they learned that, people can really hurt. Even those who claim to love you, they can really hurt. So this person is like, I'm not going to commit to this relationship. I fear being hurt, and so I would rather shield myself by not, committing. I would rather be safe by not committing in a manner that would make me vulnerable to being hurt. And that is what makes it a huge problem to have this person as a spouse, as a lover, because you're always colliding over things that you should not be colliding on. Next to the fearful inner child is the one we call the neglected inner child. And I have found out that from my experience, many people experienced neglect as they were growing up, and as a result, they have a neglected inner child. So what does how does a neglected, or a person with a neglected inner child behave? For you to understand, we have to break down neglect into three types. We have emotional neglect, we have psychological neglect, and then we have physical neglect. Starting with physical neglect, I mean, this is a person who grew up without their basic needs being provided, like food, shelter, and clothing, or even school fees, because it's also kind of a basic need. So for a child who grew up, or for a person who grew up in an environment where those were not catered for, they develop, they have a physically neglected inner child. As a result, what do? One is low self-esteem. Most of them suffer from low self-esteem. You find that they kind of, maybe I've seen me speak about this, especially on my Facebook page, that often when a child is treated in a certain way, they usually understand it through internalizing the message. They kind of set themselves a message. This is happening because of this. So when the child was neglected, they were not eating properly, they were wearing torn clothes, and they were seeing other children being treated in a different manner. What do? They start internalizing that this is something to do with me. It's because I'm not like this or the other. I'm not lovable. I'm not worth, a parent making effort to cater for my needs. So as a result, a person who grew up with such a, or who grew up in such an environment, they tend to have low self-esteem, and also low self-worth and low self-confidence, because they feel it's something to do with me. I'm not good enough, to attract being cared for, because they can see other children, they're being catered for, and they're wondering, why me? And so that is why you find that so many people struggle with low self-esteem, low self-worth, and low self-confidence. It's an issue to do with what they were denied growing up. The other thing that some of these people struggle with, people with a physically neglected inner child, some of them got into addictions as a way of coping with the pain of lack. And when I talk of addiction, I don't just mean addiction to drugs, even though it's one of them, but also addiction to to behaviors. So you find that these are people who may be resorted to abusing drugs, abusing alcohol, or even and they indulge, or they started engaging in problematic behaviors like masturbation and gambling, as a way of, getting the thrill so that they can forget what they have been going through, the abandonment they have been experiencing. So Also, you find that people who grew up with such kind of lack, it's a severe lack, by the way, when you can't get food, you can't get enough food, you can't get enough clothes, and so on. Some of them also, they have this scarcity mindset that they developed, and as a result, they will compete even where there is no need to compete. In fact, some of the severely affected ones, they'll even engage in violent behavior as a way of reaching out for something that they are imagining there is a scarcity for. So you find that a person may be in the house with their husband, with their wife, there is no competition because, of course, they are able to afford food, but this person has this mentality that, I may lack. My partner may take all the food and then I'm left with nothing. And as a result, they will start, competing for it, eating food while it's still on the fire, and so on. So what are we saying? That a person who grew up with neglect, they usually have a major problem. The way they look at themselves, the way they approach things, they always believe there is a scarcity of some kind, and thus try to outdo others, even when they don't have to do it. And in other times, some of them are found as struggling with the intimacy, and it is because, of course, if you grew up in an environment that has that had scarcity of basic needs like food, of course intimacy was neglected. They never saw anyone relating so closely, because maybe the parents were preoccupied with looking for food, looking for these other basic needs. So as a result, they struggle in relationships, because for them intimacy was not a priority, it was a luxury actually. But I need to mention this here. I should have mentioned earlier that sometimes people are affected by their childhood environment. People were affected in a different way. Like, I could have been exposed to the same environment as another person, maybe my sibling, but we sustained different impacts, of course, because there are some other factors that come in. So that is why I had to mention this, so that even if you see a person struggling with something, you can't be so quick to judge before you determine the kind of childhood environment they had. So they may be having intimacy issues, but that may be related to something else, not just the kind of childhood they had. Now, next we have the emotionally neglected inner child, and this is also a quite common one. I've met so many people who are struggling with various issues because of emotional neglect in their childhood. Now, for the emotionally neglected inner child, this is the one who was never provided with sufficient love, support, and respect as they were growing up. And most of us were, unfortunately. I don't know if you are like me, the kind of environment you grew up in. During our times, most of our parents were preoccupied with providing basic needs. If you have food, if you have clothing, if you have shelter, and the school fees is paid, the rest of the issues were treated as luxury. Of course, now we know better. Like myself, I try so much to offer to show my children love, support, and by support, I mean emotional support. Whereby if they come to you and they're troubled by something, you take time to listen to them and advise them, understand them, validate their feelings, and so on. I'm keen to do it myself. But the truth is, how many parents were doing it during our time? I've met people who tell me, Jennifer, I grew up in a family that was well up financially, but there was no love in that household. There was no love. The parents were so busy looking for money. So for those who grew up in such an environment, they tend to have an emotionally neglected inner child. And now, what are the things that they show for those who are affected? Because some are not affected by this. So like personally, I didn't have much, I wasn't affected much by this, not as severely as some of those that I have met. Number one, it's low self-worth. So that the person came to internalize, as they were growing up, they internalized the reason why I'm not shown love. I was never cuddled by my mother, held, treated, taking time to play with me and all that. The reason why that was not happening, it's because I am not lovable. I'm not lovable. I'm not good enough. There is a problem with me. Just like I told you for the case of the physical neglect, even those who were emotionally neglected, they tend to internalize that it's because there is something wrong, or there was something lacking with me as a person. As a result, you find them struggling so much with low self-worth. They still don't believe they are good enough. And I'm going to explain something here before I continue, that on the other extreme, there are those who do, they overdo. So on one side, we have those with a low self-worth, thinking that it's because I was not good enough. On the other extreme, we have those who exaggerate their importance, if I can call it that way, because they are compensating. So my parents didn't see me good enough for this. Now I am going to elevate myself up there, consider myself so important. And guess what develops out of that? That is where we get narcissistic persons. That is one of the ways in which they develop that character of seeing themselves as so important. So on the one extreme, low self-worth. The other, it's people who believe they are so important and so valuable and all that. So that is an impact of emotional neglect. Now, another impact is whereby you find that these people struggle with expressing emotions, and it's because they grew up in an environment where expressing emotions was not being done. They don't remember being shown love by their parents, or even them being, their emotions being received. As a result, they know that, or they internalize that emotions are supposed to be suppressed. You can't show that you are angry, you can't show that you are happy. So this person, you can never tell whether they are angry or they are happy. They are somehow flat, rigid, if I may use some of the terms that I've heard being used by those who come to me for help. So they come and tell me, I think I have a problem because I've been told that I tend to be rigid. It's because of this. They don't know how to express or receive love. They don't know. Now, the other thing, also an impact of emotional neglect, is that you find that these people struggle with taking care of their emotional needs, and it's because they internalized that the reason why I was not having my feelings, my emotions validated, it's because they are not important. So guess what they do? They ignore their own emotional needs. They never show themselves love. They never show themselves care. To them, I don't matter. It's other people that matter. That is the kind of internal message that they send to themselves. So that is an impact of emotional neglect as well. Now, we have others who shun intimacy. Sorry, I have to do this. Yes. So we have others who shun emotional intimacy. And these are also those who are emotionally neglected. It's because a person internalized that. Not internalized, because they never experienced the love and they never got an opportunity to express it. Then the whole experience of intimacy, emotional intimacy to be specific, feels very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. I've met women, because most of my clients are women, and I've met some who tell me that intimacy, get hugging, kissing, those things, they feel so uncomfortable to them. They cannot even allow themselves to be hugged or kissed. So you can imagine if this person gets into a relationship and then into marriage, the kind of problems they are going to be having, because their partner will never get to be emotionally intimate with them. And strangely, most of them, they don't have a problem with the sex part. They can have physical intimacy. Or I don't know how we should differentiate the two, because physical intimacy can also imply hugging and kissing and all that. But what I'm saying is, most of them, they actually don't have a problem with the sex, but they have a major problem with these other things, these love things. That is what I like calling them, love things. The rest, they have a major problem. They can't do it, and that tends to interfere with their relationship life, because what kind of a lover, what kind of a spouse won't want a woman or a man with whom they can cuddle, kiss, and all that? So that is also a major cause of issues in some marriages. Now, finally, we have the psychological neglect. Now, for those who suffered psychological neglect, these are people who grew up in environments where they were not being nurtured and they were not being listened to. The kind of an environment where your opinion, your view didn't matter. It's nothing. So as a result, a child would come and, voice some frustrations with one thing or the other, but they're not listened to. They had to beg. They had to cause some drama. let me say that because I've seen my own small daughter doing that. Sometimes if you don't listen to her, she will cause a certain drama. But as I said, I'm trying my best not to, to subject her to some of the things some of us sustained. So you find that these people grew up in an environment where they would be, they say something, the parent just faces the other way, or they are busy doing something else. They experience psychological neglect. As a result, what are the impacts? Some of the impacts that they sustain. One of them, you find these people yelling a lot, yelling a lot. I once lived with a neighbor who would yell, like you would hear her saying, "Stop doing that! What do you think you're doing?" She was always shouting and yelling at, at her children, calling them names, insulting, humiliating. These are people who internalize that I have to be dramatic in a certain way for me to be listened to. And I don't know, I think somehow their children tend to harden in a way, because the more it's like they have to keep shouting, to add the volume of shouting for the children to actually hear. So you find that these parents, they like, these individuals, they shout a lot. Sometimes they will even shout to their partners, because for them to be listened to, they have to be dramatic in one way or another. The other thing they do is threaten. Yes, I don't know if you have ever met a person and they are supposed to be making a request to you, but they kind of put it like it's a threat. You hear them saying, if you don't do that, you are going to see me. I'm doing a direct translation from Kiswahili. You are going to see me. You are going to see what I'm going to do. Or if you don't fill up this task, then I won't come tomorrow. Those kind of threats in the workplace. These are people who internalize that they have to threaten people so that they can do what they want them to do. It's also an impact of psychological neglect. The other thing is ridicule. You'll find these people doing a lot of ridiculing and being sarcastic towards other people. Also, it's a way of attracting attention. So this is a person who cannot tell you something straightforward, straightforward and in a polite way. Instead, they ridicule, or they become sarcastic towards you. Also, an impact of psychological neglect. That type of child, of a wounded inner child, if I were to get, specific, it's the discounted inner child. Now, this is a person who grew up in an environment where they were not, their view, their opinion was not valued. This is different from being listened to. This is a person who grew up where, things would happen without them being involved in any way. It's like they were dismissed, it's like they were made to feel invisible. In fact, it's like they do not exist in the environment. So whenever, if you are a parent and you're listening to me, if you have a habit of just doing things to your children without involving them in any way, then you are likely to bring up a person with a discounted inner child. Like the other day I shared with a person that we had to involve my son before we took him to boarding school, and and just get to know how he feels about it, what are his fears and so on. And someone told me, you parents of nowadays, during our times, we would just be whisked away and taken to boarding school. And that is exactly what would happen. And it's a very misguided approach, because it makes the child feel like they don't matter. You don't even want to know, how it makes them feel, whatever you're about to do to them or with them. So people who grew up with this kind of, tendency to be discounted, they develop a discounted inner child. Now, what are some of the impacts? The number one is that they tend to not believe in themselves. They don't believe in themselves because anyway, it's like they were taught, their views don't matter. So why should I give them anyway? I cannot, not even why should I give them anyway? The reason why I was not being consulted in any way, it's because, my views were not going to be good enough. They were meaningless. So they did not to believe in themselves. So even certain decisions that something they could do well, a decision that they can make in the right way, you find that most of them will not. They are always consulting other people. They don't believe there is anything they can arrive on their own. Another lady recently told me that she finds herself consulting her sister on every single thing, including very personal issues. It's as a result of, this kind of an environment. You have an inner child that believes, I cannot do things good enough on my own. Other people have to decide for me, just like it was being done as you are growing up. The other thing that these people do is that they tend to constantly seek for validation and attention. I don't know if you have ever been in an environment where a person is always, jumpy, making certain comments, being loud so that they can attract all attention to themselves. And you're wondering, everyone else is seated. Where is this person studying? One of the reasons is that some of them, they have this inner desire for attention, inner desire for validation, just like, because to fill the void that they had growing up. So that is why it could be happening the way you see them, behaving. So that is the discounted inner child, people who don't believe in themselves, low self-confidence, and all that. So the other one is the person with the parentified inner child, also a major problem in our society. Most of us grew up in an environment where our parents would leave, go look for money and all that, and we would find ourselves being left with certain responsibilities. Now, there are cases where they would go to the extreme, whereby you are doing things that actually it's a parent who should be doing. Like in that household, it's like you're the parent. You are the one who knows what people are going to eat for lunch. Yes, they are providing, but you are the one to make those decisions. You are the one to take care of all your younger siblings. You are the one to know whether they bathed. You are the one to know whether, every single thing. And in other cases, this is how some people were parentified when they were small. Their parents were consulting them on the things they should consult adults. Their parents were, they were coming to them for consolation, especially in houses or in homes where there were, domestic issues. So one parent is coming to, you. One parent was coming to you for advice, for consolation, and as a result, you became, you were made into an adult before you became an adult. So you have a parentified inner child. Now, guess what happens with this kind of people? They are very controlling and patronizing and dominating. And it's because that is how basically they were built. That is how they were made into. They believe that for things to be done well, it has to be them, because they were the one who were taking charge of things at home, in their homes. So basically what happens is, if you have a spouse with a parentified inner child, you can be sure they'll be making all decisions. They want to be in everything. They cannot allow you to do something on your own because they fear you're not going to do it. You are not going to do it well enough. Basically, they parent you the same way they were doing it in their homes. The other thing is that the other impact is they tend to do what? Yeah, basically that is it. They tend to be too unbelieving of the capacity of others to do things. They control, they dominate, and they take charge everywhere, even where they don't need to take. Now, the second last one, I'm almost finishing. I know this was quite long, but I had to do it. So the second last one is the playful inner child. This is a person who grew up in an environment where they were not allowed to play. There was a lot of restriction, and as a result, they became, they grew up with that inner desire to be playful. And so when they came out of their parents, from being under their parents, they engage in very playful behavior. So you find their spouses complaining that my child, my husband, my wife behaves in a very childish manner, always playing around like a child. And whereas there is space for that in relationships where you are just, you just let your guards down and you just engage each other in a playful manner. If you exaggerate it, then it becomes a problem in a relationship, because honestly, there are times when you're supposed to be serious. So people who have that, and also liking childhood plays, games, you find them playing games that are supposed to be played by children. And I'm not saying that it is bad, but when you overdo it, it becomes an indication of certain challenges you're having mentally, in terms of, your inner child is wounded, they desire that and all that. So lastly, we have the spoiled inner child. This is the kind of a child who had everything they desired. Anything they would ask, it would be provided. All attention, the world was revolving around them. All attention was on them. And as a result, they grew up feeling that they are so important that everything else can come to a standstill to just, for them to be taken care of. This is a very problematic inner child. And I dare say this, especially knowing that their parents who are doing this thing, or they are raising their children in this kind of manner, whereby the child is getting everything they want. They ask for something, it's provided. But the child, the mother can go to any length, to any sacrifice, just to satisfy whatever the wants, not the needs, the wants of the child. So it's a problematic, they always become problematic, especially in relationships, because remember, they believe they are so important that everyone else can wait. Their needs and their wants and preferences and interests have to be satisfied, even if it means everyone else foregoing theirs. So as a result, they are very self-centered. And unfortunately, this is one way in which narcissistic people are molded. Because this is a person who doesn't care about others. They don't have empathy. What they care about is just their, whatever they want with their lives, with themselves to be fulfilled. So that is one of the ways in which we get narcissistic characters. The other one being those who are abused and they grew up with a lot of bitterness and all that. So now I'm coming to an end, and I have to mention this. Even if you find that you fall in any of these categories that I've explained, I would like to encourage you that there is still hope. There is still something that you can do. You can go for therapy. It really helps in identifying, some of the issues in which you are manifesting your wounded inner child. And then you work with the therapist in coming up with the strategies of, modulating whatever it is that you show. And you can also get help by reading certain books. There are quite a number of books out there on healing your emotional self and all that. But I also have to clarify that they cannot replace therapy, but they can also be helpful in one way or another. And also, like I mentioned earlier, there are some people who grew up in those environments that I've explained here, but they don't have that kind of, they were not affected in a certain manner or in a severe manner, so they are just fine. So you don't go judging people just because they came from certain backgrounds. Until you see the manifestation of the problematic behavior, you cannot just conclude that a person has a, they have a problem. So if you would like me to hold your hand in healing from any of these kind of inner child, just reach out to me. My number is passing, below here. Just reach out to me. I would love to walk with you the journey. It's an area that I'm so passionate about, and it's because myself, I suffered because of, being wounded from my childhood. I suffered. And it's only until I healed that I was able to live what I would call a normal life, and especially in as far as my relationship was concerned. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have learned. As usual, I beseech you, I request you that you may subscribe to my, to my channel. You may like this video so that it can reach even more people, and I hope to see you back here soon. Thank you.